Everybody, wanted to do this video here about not letting astrology control your life. Now, I love astrology. I love constantly learning about astrology and things like that. However, I think that, in a lot of ways you can get stuck allowing it to control your life. And actually, I am somebody who it did. It controlled my life for a good few years, and I didn't take action on anything because it was like every single video I'd watch, it would be, somebody would say, oh, this month it's not a good month to do this, and then I'd wait, and then next month it wouldn't be a good month, and then the month after that it wouldn't be a good month, and I think that you can get caught up in a trap like this if you just constantly listen to these things. So a couple people wrote to me because I definitely said that it was a good time to take action for certain signs during this month and next month and moving forward as well, even though it's a Mars retrograde and a Mercury retrograde and Pluto retrograde and Saturn retrograde and Jupiter and everything else that's going retrograde as well. So, but it's definitely a good time for a lot of people. But I want to talk about also some things that have happened to me as well, so I can give you some good examples here of what could happen if you take action during a Mercury retrograde or a Mars retrograde, because definitely some good things can happen, a lot of learning lessons and things like that. Even if things don't work out, sometimes things can even work out even better during these periods, and we're going to talk about that as well. But the first thing is, a lot of people say don't buy technology during Mars retrogrades and Mercury retrogrades, both. It's considered to be both a bad period of time. So I went back and I looked at when I purchased this iPad that is still working magically, right? It's still working, still works. There's nothing wrong with it, and I still use it. And I purchased that back in March of 2012, towards the end of March there. Mars was retrograde and Mercury was retrograde at the same exact time, basically. Well, they didn't actually go retrograde at the same time. Mars was, I believe, January 23rd of that year. Mercury would have been March 12th of that year as well. And I like I said, I had to go back and look at these dates and look at when I purchased that and everything, but I purchased it at the end of March, basically. So it was more towards the end. Both of those planets went direct, I believe, after the 9th of April. Both of them went direct. I think Mars went direct on the 14th. Again, don't quote me on that because it was a while ago that I looked those two things up. But so again, that was 4 years ago. That's still working. Like I said, I purchased those during two retrogrades. That's supposed to be like the worst time to purchase technology and things like that. And like I said, it's still working. There's nothing wrong with it. Hasn't broken yet. Nothing, still use it. So again, it's like, you can allow these things to control your life, or you can also move forward and, do what you have to do. When I purchased that, I knew all about the retrogrades and things like that. I knew what was going on. But what I think is important as well is that you just really, it's about learning, right? Retrogrades are really about learning and being a detective and studying, which I think is interesting. We're going to talk about this at the end a little bit because, I've been hammering this, I know, but, Pluto's retrograde, there's a lot of aspects to Pluto as well. And to me, Pluto is like the detective, if I can get that word out today. And, it's all about studying and learning and really doing your research and things like that during this time. If you can do that, guess what? You can buy electronics and they'll work and nothing will happen, right? But I mean, I guess if you want to be extra safe, then of course don't purchase anything during this time. But again, it's really, to me, a personal choice. I know plenty of other people have purchased things during retrogrades, still work. There's nothing wrong with them. But again, if you want to be extra careful, I totally see that. But what's really important is not purchasing things during this time. What's more important is what action you take in your life and how you move forward. So that involves starting businesses, starting relationships, starting new projects, looking at starting new projects, trying to get new jobs. The list goes on and on there of things that, you could be thinking about doing. I think these retrogrades also bring these things back up in us. I think, if you've ever had a thought in the past of starting a business, it's like all of a sudden the retrograde comes around, and all of a sudden it's like you have a bunch of good ideas again, maybe, about starting that business you've always wanted to start, but then you're like, oh, it's a retrograde, I can't start it during this time, which I think is wrong because what I think sometimes astrology is like a blessing and a curse, right? I think that knowing these things is great, but on the other hand, what if you're preventing yourself from having an experience that you're supposed to have? What if you're actually prolonging the pain that you're in? Like, say you are in some sort of pain, say you don't have money, and you need money or something like that. Again, that's a form of payment. Or say you've been lonely and you don't have a relationship, but you really need a relationship. But what if during a retrograde period you're meant to be in a relationship so that you can learn some sort of lesson, even if it doesn't work out after, right? But you're supposed to learn something maybe that moves you forward. Again, is that the case? Is that exactly what's supposed to happen? I don't know, but I think it could be. I think that some of us maybe are meant to take action during these retrogrades. I think that's why sometimes, I don't know about anybody else, but during retrograde periods, I always feel like getting a lot more done. Some of my most productive times have been during Mercury retrogrades. I've gotten so much done, tons of business, and had some of my best months during Mercury retrogrades as well. Super highly productive periods of time, dealing with lots of people, communicating left and right, all things you're not supposed to be doing, right? And well, all things that are supposed to be made at least a little bit more difficult during these periods. And I've only had positive experiences. Again, maybe it's because I'm aware of these periods of time and I'm aware to be careful of my words and things like that, but that just also kind of proves the point. It's like, as long as you're careful, as long as you're aware, and as long as you're kind of researching and learning during this period of time, it's kind of like things will be okay. So again, just to give you another example of something that happened to me, again, I think that during these retrogrades, I'm sorry, there's a little, I have my windows open, there's a little bug that just got in here, so during these retrogrades, I think about, like, what are you preventing, right? Like, what type of future success are you preventing, or things like that? And back in 2009, December 20th, almost to the day, December 20th, 2009, I moved here to where I'm living right now. And at that time, I was thinking about starting a business. I did start a business. Basically, it's a really long story, but I was promoting tickets to events and things like that. And I was selling tickets to concerts and all sorts of things during that time. And so basically, on that day, almost on that day, it was a few days later that I started that business. I started doing that. And the funny thing is looking back at those dates, almost to the day, that business ended. It only lasted for about almost exactly 80 days of the retrograde, but it was a little bit longer because it did last a little bit after the retrograde. So it was, about 3 months, 90 days, something like that, I had that business. And so again, the retrograde, it did end that business, right? However, at that time, when I started that business, I was like super desperate for money. I desperately needed money. I had a car bill to pay that I couldn't pay at the time, and I had a bunch of other things that I needed to pay at the time, and I really needed money. And that business made me a ton of money during that short period of time. So again, what if I listened to astrology and I didn't take action when I had that idea? I was super motivated at the time. I really wanted to take action. I feel like a lot of you also might have periods during retrogrades and things where you're super motivated, and depending on your situation, maybe you need money, or maybe, again, I don't want to only focus on money here. I want to focus on everything, relationships, spirituality, whatever it is that you need, whatever it is that you're working on, but maybe you're afraid to start it, because of a retrograde. And again, so what if I didn't start it during that time? Well, there would have been some pretty obvious consequences. I could have lost my car at the time, which I needed, because I also had a job at the time that I needed to get to. I could have lost, so many other things. The other thing to think about is that business, launched me off into so many other things that I was able to start and become successful at, and that have changed my life in so many ways. So again, what is it in your life that you could be doing during this retrograde that, will it last after the retrograde? Maybe not. Maybe it will disappear. However, where can it take you? What can it teach you? What can you learn? I think that there's so much here. I think that doing things during retrogrades is great. I think we need to change our mindset. We need to look at them as periods of learning. So even if that means failure, some of the best things I've ever learned have been through failure, of course. So, I think during these periods of time, I should say, it's really important. Also, during 2009, it's funny because there was also a Mercury retrograde almost at the same time. So that also was kind of like in there when I started that business. So just to give you a little bit of background there. The other thing to think about is I probably wouldn't even be doing these videos if this stuff didn't happen in a lot of ways. So, all these things, I learned so much during these periods of time, and it led me to this. It led me to doing videos as well. I think that not really, it's all about wanting to avoid pain in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people maybe are afraid to take action during retrograde because they don't want to experience a pain. Like, say it's like, you start a relationship during Mercury retrograde. Well, it's probably not going to last after the retrograde, right? Or at least most astrologers would tell you that. And it's probably also true. Like, for the most part, do relationships last after retrogrades? If you start one during a retrograde, usually there's some communication issues there. However, again, what could you learn from that? And I think that really some of us are maybe, again, wanting to avoid pain, wanting to avoid experiencing pain. But it's like if we can live through the short-term pain of losing something, it's like, where's the gain? What can we gain? I think we can gain a lot from these periods of time, and I think that's what's important. The other problem I have with retrogrades and avoiding doing things during retrogrades, in a lot of ways, is that it kind of implies that you only have one chance to do something. Again, I don't want to be, talking too much about myself here, but I'm an entrepreneur. I've started many businesses, and it's like, I've had plenty of ideas. I've had plenty of ideas to start businesses. I've started businesses, obviously, during these periods of time. Right after this retrograde here in 2009 that I was talking about, I was able to start a business again immediately. Right after I lost that one, retrograde was clear, started a new business. That business lasted for years. So again, it's like, but I only had the ideas to start that business, that second business after that first one, because I went through that experience of losing it in the first place. And it kind of gave me an extra little bit of motivation, right? Sometimes that fear of loss can be extremely motivating and extremely powerful. Again, I'm using business as examples, but I mean, this applies to everything in your life. So don't just think of this as business. Think of it as a lot of other things. So again, I think that it implies that you only have one shot. And again, same thing with relationships. If you're afraid to start a relationship with somebody during retrograde, it kind of implies that you think you only have one chance to meet a single person, which is a whole nother thing that I could go off on a rant on. I'm already ranting about this, about how really there are plenty of people for us at any given time. So, I think it's a great time to take action. I think failing can be very beneficial during these periods of time as well. Maybe even more so. Maybe even failing during these times could be even more beneficial because maybe we could gain so much more knowledge out of failing during these periods of time. I think also with this Pluto retrograde and all the stuff going on with Pluto, it's really important not to be an extremist, right? I think just over the past several years, just everything that's has been going on, I think has made all these like extremist things come out where people are very one side or the other, and very extreme in their beliefs, and it just seems like that's all over the place now. Does that mean you can have your own beliefs? No, absolutely not. But it definitely means, be a detective. Like I said, Pluto, I always think of a detective for some reason, and to me it's all about learning and examining things, so I think it's a good time to do that. And again, not to take an extremist view of astrology. Try to take more of a balanced view where it's like, yeah, you see what's going on, but you work with the energy. I think that's what's more important, working with this retrograde energy, understanding what's going on and what could happen, and staying open to all possibilities is also very important during these times. So, really, this video is all about don't be afraid to start things during retrogrades. Could you lose them? Will you lose them? Yeah, there's probably a good chance, especially if you're starting a relationship or a business or something. You very well could. Or like the iPad, it could stick around for a very long period of time. You never know. But I think it's important to remember that also the learning that can take place by taking action during these times might kind of outweigh any negatives.